All right, we're recording. This is Jeff. I have Shari here again, and we are making our way through C.S. Lewis's first published work, Spirits in Bondage, a
Yeah.
cycle of lyrics. It is a book of poems, and we are in the first of three sections that the book is broken down into. The first section is called, is it the prison or the prison house?
The prison
Part one, the prison house is what it's called.
house.
And
Yeah.
we've made our way through the first three poems of this segment of the book, and now we're on to the fourth. And do you want to give some more insight, Shari, after we read the poem, or do you want to explain some of the things that we find in this first poem?
Actually, I was going to relate it to the second one of the next poem that we were going to
Oh,
read. So I'll just wait. I'll just hang on to it.
okay. Well, I will then read poem number 4. It's called Victory. Roland is dead. Cahulan's crest is low. The battered war rear wastes and turns to rust, and Helen's eyes and Iseult's lips are dust, and dust the shoulders and the breasts of snow. The fairy people from our woods are gone. No dryads have I found in all our trees. No Triton blows his horn about our seas, and Arthur sleeps for hints in Avalon. The ancient songs they wither as the grass, and waste as doth a garment waxen old. All poets have been fools who thought to mold a monument more durable than grass, or than brass. For these decay, but not for that decays the yearning, high, rebellious spirit of man, the never rested yet since life began. From striving with red nature and her ways. Now in the filth of war, the baresark shout of battle, it is vexed, and yet so oft, out of the deeps of old, it rose aloft, that they who watch the ages may not doubt. Though often bruised, oft broken by the rod, yet like the phoenix from each fiery bed, higher the stricken spirit lifts its head, and higher till the beast become a god.
Mm.
You know anything to say about that one?
Well, I did a little bit of digging actually. I actually looked on Wikipedia, looked up Spirits of Bondage on Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done that?
I have not. I'm a very poor student.
Well, what I thought was interesting, because last time we talked, I said I thought that from what I was reading, the poems I was reading, I thought that C.S. Lewis was agnostic, and then I was reminded that he was an atheist, like claimed to be an atheist. But now I don't know how right the Wikipedia page is, but they do say there that he is writing it from an agnostic viewpoint.
Okay.
He's writing these poems. Kind of, well, yeah, with that angry young man, kind of not a total non-believer, just kind of shaking his fist at God, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. I just wanted to throw that in there. And then these people that he mentioned, and another thing they said too was for his age, when he entered the military, his we call them the guys that are higher up in office than he is, his superiors. They couldn't believe how well read he was for a guy his age. And not just in modern novels, but in classics, and a lot of mythology. And I know that was really a heavy point in his education. He loved mythology. Beowulf was a favorite of his, and so on. So it makes sense that he's in that world, right? Like, because when you're 20 something, you don't read a lot of something if you don't like it. So I think and so I looked up some of these people, Roland and how do you say that guy? Cahulan,
Cahulan, I think. Cahulan. Probably getting it wrong.
They were both. Roland was a French hero during a period of Charlemagne,
Hmm.
and Cuchulainn is a really old story in Ireland. It has kind of a mythological element to it. And is Helen of Troy, of course. And Iseult is also known as Isolde, which is the story of Tristan and Isolde.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of
I've
like
heard it, but I'm not familiar with it.
a Romeo Juliet type, tragic love story.
Okay.
Um, and there was another thing. Oh yeah, and then I just wanted to give you some of the lingo, because I think it really helps to, Arthur is in there, the dryads, the Triton is, the guy. Is a lower god of the sea, but they have the pitchfork and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And then he says, now in the filth of war, this is the fifth stanza, the beginning of the fifth stanza. Now in the filth of war, the bearsark shout of battle, it is vexed. And I thought, what is that word?
I did look that one
You
up.
did it?
Yeah.
So I looked up so much stuff now. I'm trying to remember, what was that? Was that Nordic people?
Yeah, it's a Norse warrior or a Viking, and what I read about it is they ran into battle without any armor. So it's basically a bear skin, um, uh, very fierce warrior running into battle. It's basically a Viking
Yeah.
without.
And what I read about it was that they were in some kind of trance-like state, and it is the derivative of the word berserk.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think I did remember reading that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was about to say crazed, and then I held back, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, berserk. That's right."
yeah. So that really gives you the berserk shout of battle, like there's these crazed warriors, right, running in there with in some kind of trance-like state. They don't have any of their faculties; they're just killers, in that sense. So I just thought that was really interesting. Yeah, so that's a little bit of interesting background to some of the words that he's using.
Yeah, I have several guesses as I read through this and, weigh it against some of the information that you shared right there. It seems to be at least the first three or four stanzas, maybe the first three stanzas. Um, he's comparing or contrasting, I always get those mixed up, the difference between um, poetry and stories and the things that excite his imagination, because I know he had a love of particularly Norse mythology, if not Irish mythology as well.
Yeah,
Um, and he's comparing that to more of what he sees as the real world, um, the suffering and the troubles that he sees in life, particularly in battle and in war. And then he turns towards that at the end, I would say, in the last two or three stanzas. So the first seems to be, all of these things that the poets seem to dream up don't seem to last, or they seem to die away. Um, Roland is dead, and Roland is based on a historical figure. I did kind of look at that a little bit,
mm-hmm.
but there was a lot of, you know, um, legend around Roland as well.
Yeah,
But he just seems to be focused a little bit in the beginning on, these things have died away. These things that were part of our dreams or part of our mythology, we don't really see them around us if we ever saw them at all. Again, I'm just stabbing at guesses here. Um, and he even says that all poets have been fools to think that they could mold something that was going to last for a long time, but it all decays. It's decayed. Um, but the thing that has never rested and doesn't decay is this rebellious spirit of man. And then it seems to me that he's linking that to kind of the berserker's spirit or the spirit
mm-hmm.
of men in battle who are fighting for greater things that they can only attain after death. And that's when I'm connecting it to Norse mythology and thinking about, Valhalla and where all the warriors in North, I keep saying North, Norse mythology go.
Yeah.
So there's just some ideas that came to mind as I'm, looking through this again.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I had to keep looking back to when I was reading the poem was that it's called Victory.
Mm.
It sounds really like defeat,
Yes.
right? So he's saying Roland is dead, and Roland died a martyr's death in a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Cuchulain's crest is low, and Cuchulain was also a dog, like a mythological dog figure too, right? So the crest of the dog, like, the ferociousness of him,
Mm-hmm.
it was low. He was defeated. The battered war rear wastes and turns to rust. So you can just imagine all of the paraphernalia on the battlefield, just laying around.
Mm.
It's over, right? But there's all this stuff in there, and it's just going to rust. And Helen's eyes and Isolde's lips are dust. And to me, that's almost like the women who have been directly affected by this war. I mean, it's a victory, but they haven't got their sons. They don't have their husbands.
They've lost everything worth living for.
Yeah. And dust the shoulders and the breasts of snow. The fairy people from our woods are gone. So there's, he talks about it. I think it's in the next poem, actually. Anyway, yeah, Europe was so devastated after the war, right? And everything was destroyed and burnt out, and logged, and like it was just devastated, and so the fairy people had to leave, and the mythology left when they left, right?
Mm-hmm.
All that left. No dryads have I found in all our trees. They're another kind of nymph. And no Triton blows his horn about our seas. The seas were full of wreckage. Arthur sleeps far hence in Avalon. The ancient songs, they wither as the grass, and waste as doth a garment waxen old. All poets have been fools who thought to mold a monument more durable than brass. So, there was a lot of people writing victory poems. But to him, I mean, in those first three stanzas anyway, when he looks at the victory, it's a loss, it's a defeat. Mm-hmm. He sees the pain and the emotional pain and the wreckage and probably the futility of it all and the folly of it all, right? So that, and that's kind of what interested me. I mean, the fact that he called it victory, it's really sarcastic.
Yeah. That's the thought that I was just having, because, as he says, all of these things are dead, as he's looking all around him, at the reality that he sees, all of these, all of the myths, the poets, it's all gone. And the only victory that can be apprehended is that of those in battle who are giving their life for this thing that, if he's approaching it from an atheistic, non-metaphysical standpoint of just seeing those things, as not real, not true, then yeah, it is a sarcastic title of victory. It's just like, yeah, there's your victory. You fought for nothing. You fought for the dirt.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, so many lives were lost. It was just an incredible number of people. Everyone was affected by that war, and so probably as a young man, and as many young men, they jumped in, full of excitement and patriotism and whatever, and we're gonna do this thing, and we're gonna fight, and then when it's all over, it's then it's what happened here? What was this all for? And everyone I loved is gone, and I'm the only one left standing. And it must feel really much like defeat.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you want to read the next one, number 5?
Sure. Irish Nocturne. Now the grey mist comes creeping up from the waste ocean's weedy strand and fills the valley as a cup, if filled of evil drink in a wizard's hand. And the trees fade out of sight like dreary ghosts unhealthily into the damp, pale night till you almost think that a clearer eye could see some shape come up of a demon seeking apart his meat, as Grendel sought in heart the thanes that sat by the wintry log. Grendel, or the shadowy mass of Baelor, or the man with the face of clay, the grey walker who used to pass over the rock arch nightly to his prey. But here at the dumb, slow stream where the willows hang, with never a wind to blow the mists apart, bitter and bitter it is for thee, O my heart, looking upon this land where poets sang. Thus with the dreary shroud unwholesome over it spread, and knowing the fog and the cloud in her people's heart and head, even as it lies forever upon her coasts, making them dim and dreamy, lest her sons should ever arise. And remember all their boasts, for I know that the colorless skies and the blurred horizons breed lonely desire in many words and brooding in never deed. Oh, that was the other thing that I read too about this book. It was meant to be read in the order that it's printed in.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, because it's taking you on a journey.
Yeah.
So remember the last time I told you, I said I wasn't sure if it was chronological or not.
Oh, okay.
When we talked about the sacked out village.
Yeah.
And the one before it.
Yeah.
Because it gave me a feeling of chronological order, actually, to read the two side by side. So, yeah, I don't know if it's chronological, but it's supposed to be read in this order. So, yeah.
Yeah, I liked. Well, I had two thoughts. I guess I'll touch on the one that just came right after you said that. Yeah, when we talked about French Nocturne, and then comparing it to this one, it's almost like he's either looking at his old Irish countryside in his memory, but then seeing it painted with all of this, this darkness or this foreboding that was coming over it. So that's one of my first thoughts. And then the other one that I had that I just really like the imagery as how he describes, this gray mist creeping in, as if it were filling up the drink in a wizard's hand. I don't know. There's just something, well, obviously magical about that, but it was just.
Well, you can actually see that, right? Like you can see the mist coming from off the ocean and filling a little valley like a cup.
Yeah, I can picture it. Yeah, it's just, that's one of the things that poetry, is capable of doing so well, is just like painting this or setting this picture up in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a well, okay, so remember I told you I downloaded that Kahulain story. It's written by lady, I think her name is Gregory, in 1902. And she was British, but she was born and raised in Ireland and had an Irish nanny. And the Irish nanny used to tell her those stories because I guess they're very old stories, ancient Irish mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And she felt it important to write it down because the Irish, so it was really interesting to find out this, that they were a oppressed people, the Irish, for almost forever, right? They were always underneath some other, other government or
kingdom.
Country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and she had a love for them, and she had a love for their mythology and for their history. But the powers that be didn't feel it was necessary for the Irish mythology to be told, or their history. That would just give them ideas about themselves, and then they would be harder to control. And so nobody wrote it down, and so she did, and she got a lot of flack for it, actually. And W.B. Yeats actually does the not the prologue, but what do you call that? Like the little write up before the book.
The forward. Yeah.
The forward, or he was an Irish poet, and he was so thankful that she took it upon herself to do this, and she was a woman, and it wasn't a woman's job to do this either. And so I read that because I was looking up the character Cahulin, and I didn't, because I never heard of him before. And then I read this whole thing around it, and then I read Irish Nocturne, and I thought, oh wow, this really ties in, because I mean, this is what I'm seeing anyway. I couldn't be wrong, but he's home. Okay, I'm just imagining he's home after the war. There he is, and he's looking at his homeland, and he's seeing it as a place where once all this mythology thrived. It had a place, and when it thrived, the sun was shining, and it was, but now, well, let me just read here. Looking upon this land where poets sang, thus with the dreary shroud unwholesome over it spread, which is kind of like an oppressor.
Yeah.
And knowing the fog and the cloud in her people's heart and head, right? People of Ireland. Even as it lies forever upon her coasts. So, the cloud is on the coast, but it's also in their hearts and in their heads, right? They're oppressed, making them dim and dreamy, lest her sons should ever arise. That's really interesting, because that's exactly why they didn't promote Irish mythology, right? And some of their history. And remember all their boasts, right? For I know that the colorless skies and the blurred horizons breed lonely desire and many words and brooding, and never a deed. They were just lonely and broody, and and they couldn't rise up. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm just reading into this, but that's really what it feels like to me. Like he's looking at his country, and he's mourning the fact that they can't be proud of their history. They can't be proud of their mythology. They can't, they don't, it's not written down anywhere. I mean, and this Lady Gregory wrote this Cahulin story in 1902, so it's not too, it's pretty new to have an Irish myth written down, right? In his time. And I think probably her having done that brought up a lot of prejudice and made the Irish feel like this poem, dim and dreamy and oppressed, and
I'm thinking about this one too, in comparison to the other Nocturne poem, French Nocturne, that we read in our last conversation. And they both just seem to have that sense of hopelessness to them. Like in the French Nocturne, he kind of snaps himself out of what seems to be hopelessly dreaming about where that plane that flies by is going, and how it can possibly escape off to somewhere else outside of this prison of war and of death and of suffering.
Yeah, that would make a good. I mean, the title of it, Nocturne, in both poems it's evening, and evening is when the sun sets.
When
it's set and done, when there's nothing more you can do about it, right? So
the
Yeah.
symbolism of darkness,
Yeah.
night. Lonely desire in many worlds, and brooding, and never a deed. Did I say worlds? I meant words.
It's, yeah.
Huh.
I like that. And Grendel was out of Beowulf.
Right.
Grendel was really interesting. According to Norse mythology, Grendel was a direct descendant of Cain.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And this is
I
just
thought it
a
was.
quick Wikipedia search on Balor in Irish mythology was a tyrant warrior of the Fomorians, a group of supernatural beings. He was often described as a giant with a large eye that wreaks destruction whenever the eye is opened. He's been interpreted as a personification of drought, blight, and the scorching sun.
Hmm.
So it's like he's in these this poem and the last one, he's sprinkling in both Norse and
Irish.
Irish mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we mentioned this before, but Lewis was born in Ireland. That's actually where he was from.
He's considered Irish. His mother was Irish, and I don't know his father, but his mother was, I believe.
I can't remember how old he was when he left.
Well, she died when he was 10, and he was still there. He was somewhere near Belfast, I think.
I think I remember reading in Surprised by Joy that they had a really big library in the house, and so he spent a lot of time consuming the books that were in there. And if I remember right, his dad was an attorney, a lawyer of some sort. I may be remembering that wrong, but I would anticipate that they had a lot of books to keep him busy. Not the purpose of keeping him busy, but he would not be short on things to read.
No, and his mother went to college or university. I don't know, because I just read over this stuff so quickly, which was really unusual for a woman in her time
Hmm.
to. So she was very big on reading books. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I wondered too, that if during the war he was, oh, did we have a little glitch? My internet's really sucking lately.
I can hear you fine. I haven't noticed anything.
Um, I wondered when I read this if, he could have ignorance is bliss, right? He could have been living in a world where, as an Irishman, he never experienced prejudice or was never told how dumb Irishmen are and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And then during the war, he could have encountered that, right?
Yeah.
And he came home and he looked at his homeland differently and realized that it was as oppressed as some of the people that he may have seen during the war,
Hmm.
right? And hadn't really noticed it before because he was in it. So
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
because he says, with never a wind to blow the mists apart, you know bitter and bitter it is for thee, oh my heart. So it's like, he's looking at Ireland, and that's where he says, looking upon this land where poets sang, thus with the dreary shroud unwholesome over it spread, and knowing the fog and the cloud in her people's heart and head. So, yeah, I just wondered if maybe he had encountered something that was new to him, and he had his eyes opened,
Hmm.
about his own people.
In that line, even as that shroud even as it lies forever upon her coast.
Yeah.
It's almost as if, from his perspective, maybe looking back on it in the idea that you were talking about, he is just thinking, yeah, it's always been this way with Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, I'm gonna jump to the next one.
Yeah.
Number 6. It's a short one. It's called Spooks. Last night I dreamed that I was come again unto the house where my beloved dwells, after long years of wandering and pain. And I stood out beneath the drenching rain, and all the street was bare and black with night. But in my true love's house was warmth and light. Yet I could not draw near, nor enter in, and long I wondered if some secret sin or old unhappy anger held me fast, till suddenly it came into my head that I was killed long since, and lying dead. Only a homeless wraith that way had passed. So thus I found my true love's house again, and stood unseen amid the winter night, and the lamp burned within a rosy light, and the wet street was shining in the rain.
I couldn't make heads or tails of this one.
So what I see in this one, and I'm connecting it with war, and I presume that he's imagining what death might be like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so just in one, very simple reading, and it might connect to something else that's more personal to Lewis, which we can speculate about. And I won't let the potential inaccuracies of speculation stop me from speculating. But maybe this is just his imagination of what a lot of soldiers have is a dream to get back to a person or a home or both that they love, to get away from this war and to go back to peace. And he has a dream that he got to go back home to his beloved's house, and he's there. And I just imagine this scene where he's like, I can't get close and I can't get in, and I'm wondering if it's because I've done something wrong, if I'm being held back for some secret sin that I have in my heart, and that's why I can't partake in this this goodness. And then he realized, oh, wait a second, I'm dead. I'm just a ghost that's passing by this house. Of course I can't get in. And this last stanza, I'm trying to make it all connect there. So thus I found my true love's house again, and stood unseen amid the winter's night, and the lamp burned within a rosy light, and the wet street was shining in the rain. So, maybe he woke from the dream, and maybe he made it back home. At least whoever it is that's the narrator in this poem. So that's just one not fully formed idea that I had as I was reading through it. And then, I connect things back to his mom quite a bit whenever he's talking about longing and missing his beloved. So maybe, most of the time beloved is talking about a romantic interest. I at least that's what I associate it with in poetry and literature.
Yeah.
But perhaps there's a piece of his mother in there somewhere too, who he lost when he was very young. So those are just a couple of ideas that I think about as I read this one.
Yeah, the only thought I have on this poem is that I thought he might have written it while looking at the corpse of a soldier in a trench and imagining what that soldier might be experiencing.
Yeah.
Going home and wanting to go in, but he can't because he's dead.
Yeah.
I kind of, because it certainly isn't his personal experience. He didn't die. So, so I just thought, I wonder if he was just imagining what it would be like to be a ghost. And, like that dead soldier right there, where's he going to go? Where did he go? Did he go home?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he could go in? they realize he was a ghost, you
Yeah.
know?
It's like maybe even just the last thoughts that are firing through the brain as someone's dying, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we,
And then he says, in the beginning of it, he says, I stood out beneath the drenching rain, and all the street was bare and black with night. And then last verse, he says, and stood unseen amid the winter night, and the lamp burned within a rosy light, and the wet street was shining in the rain. So it's two different settings.
mm-hmm.
Maybe one that he's imagining and one that it really is. And
Yeah,
there he's standing there, and you know, and he's like, okay, I'm actually standing out in front of my true love's house, and here I am, and
yeah.
I'm alive, you know.
It's the difference between the I'm losing the word for it, but the hopeless. It's not the word that I'm looking for, but the hopeless dreams of the hopeless want or desire of the one who died, who can't actually experience it, and then that in comparison with somebody who's actually there and being able
Yeah,
to walk home to their beloved.
yeah. If it was a film, if it was a movie, you'd have this like black and white thing panning a war torn scene, you know, of the trenches and a body laying there,
Mm.
and then that soul somehow standing on a street and realizing it was a ghost,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would end with a full color thing of C.S. Lewis actually standing outside of his friend's house or his own home, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's how it feels to me. But like I said, I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. Like I don't really know what if he's talking about himself or he's talking about someone else, or probably both.
Well, I know that he had a friend. I'm probably going to get the name wrong, but I think it's Patty Moore was his friend in the war who he made a promise to that if his friend were to die in battle, that he committed to go back home and care for his mother and his sister.
Right.
And that ended up happening. And so he went back and cared for her. And there's no direct evidence of this, but there is strong suspicion that he had more than a friendly relationship with his best friend's mom. That they were that they had a romantic relationship, and it's something that apparently he never talked about or wrote about, his whole life. But I'm just curious if when this poem was written, if it had something to do with his friend dying.
Good. Yeah. Good. It'd be interesting to know when his friend died.
Yeah,
Like if he died early in the war or later on, or how old they were, you know.
yeah. It's probably somewhere in the many biographies that I haven't read that I need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that. You know, you mentioned that one day that you had never read anything else written by anyone else about C.S. Lewis, and I
Yeah.
thought, that's not such a bad thing. You know, because when you wander around with the man himself, you actually have, you build a relationship with him, right?
Yeah.
And when it's kind of like watching a movie before you read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of my approach is I want to get as much of what he wrote and his thoughts and ideas and his, the spirit of the person
Yeah.
before I then go and read what other people had to say about him. But sometimes I just can't help it because I'm just like, reading is one thing, but it's obviously very easy to pull up a video and listen to a conversation. And Mary pointed in the comments of our first conversation, she pointed us in the direction, or maybe me in the direction. Oh yeah, I think you responded to it too, in the direction of Walter Hooper. having a conversation with Eric Metaxas, a series of conversations about C.S. Lewis and his experience with him. And I watched the first one, and there's some really fun information in those stories. People who had first person accounts and knew the man personally, to hear them tell some stories. So that's always fun. But yeah, I'm trying my best to hold off reading biographies until I can get through all of the body of his work.
Yeah, and I often think if we knew Moses personally, or David personally, or we would be going, well, I don't know if I want to read their books, because we place so much importance on just the way people work things out in their lives and their everyday, and we're, as human beings, we make really bad calls on how to behave, and and God doesn't, he obviously is not necessarily concerned with that too much. I mean, he is, but
it doesn't stop God from working.
That's right.
It doesn't stop God from working with us and through us.
Yeah. So anyway, I think if we knew everything there was to know about those guys, we wouldn't think very highly of them.
No. And I think about this too. If we knew everything there was to know about ourselves, I don't think that we'd like it very much. Would, first of all, we wouldn't be able to handle it. I think we would just freeze in paralysis, and that's just us. The Bible talks about you can't look at God and live. I think we probably couldn't look at the full breadth of ourselves and continue living. We'd probably die at that too. And then, you extrapolate that out infinitely into God. Well, of course, we can't look at God and live.
I started watching this guy who's got a YouTube channel called Inspiring Philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a video about hell, and I was watching it, and he had a clip there's just a couple of actors out of The Great Divorce. And it was a woman who showed up, and she was really excited because apparently her son had died before she did. So she was like, oh, I want to go see my son.
Mm-hmm. I remember that part of the book.
And her brother-in-law, and it was acted out, right? It was a clip from, I don't know, it was like probably a low-budget film or something. But
somebody dramatized several of those, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, I wouldn't be much different than her. I was watching it, and I was thinking, I would say that. I would say you have no idea what a mother's love for her child is like. I would think all those things, and say all those things, right?
Yeah.
It was really disturbing, actually, for me to watch that. I was just like, wow. Yeah. So like you're saying, if we knew everything there was to know about ourselves, it would be a little terrifying.
That's a really, really good book. I want to do something with that book. I haven't figured out quite what, something with a video, but I'm still thinking it through. Julian and I have had a conversation about it. He recently read it, but we were unable to record it. So,
yeah.
Oh well.
Oh, we can tackle it after this one.
Yeah, right. Well, I think we've got enough time for this one more poem.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Yeah, you want to read that one? Yeah.
Okay. This is one. Oh, no, this is not the long one. Okay. Apology. If men should ask Despoina why I tell of nothing glad nor noble in my verse to lighten hearts beneath this present curse and build a heaven of dreams in real hell, go you to them and speak among them thus. There were no greater grief than to recall down in the rotting grave where the live worms crawl, green fields above that smiled so sweet to us. Is it good to tell old tales of Troynovant, or praises of dead heroes tried and sage, or sing the queens of unforgotten age, Brynhild and Maeve and virgin Bradamant? How should I sing of them? Can it be good to think of glory now when all is done and all our labor underneath the sun has brought us this and not the thing we would? All these were rosy visions of the night, the loveliness and wisdom feigned of old. But now we wake. The east is pale and cold. No hope is in the dawn and no delight. This one is very similar to the first one, Victory. In its the feeling of it, it's kind of like, to me anyway, he's apologizing for the war. He's apologizing for all of the all of the devastation that they have spread across the earth, and pain. And like he says, if men should ask why I tell of nothing glad or noble in my verse to lighten hearts beneath this present curse and build a heaven of dreams in real hell, go to them and speak among them thus: there were no greater grief than to recall down the rotting grave where the lithe worms crawl, green fields above that smiled so sweet to us. So he doesn't feel like they were building a heaven of dreams, He doesn't have anything fun and good to say about it. He's sorry, He's sorry for it.
There was one piece in that poem that just made me think, he's just making the point that all of these rosy dreams and poems and mythology and things that, excite our hearts are just things that we were making up in the darkness, in the night, just to help us. It's just, things that we made up to feel better about to cope with the reality, to cope with the harsh reality of where it is that we actually live. And it's nothing more than that. It just reminds me of a lot of secular or atheist arguments against religion, and how it's just something that we made up to help us feel better.
That was good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because he was such a mythology geek, really,
Mm-hmm.
he just constantly draws all that back into it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the myth arose from battles. Like, a lot of the people who were heroes were warriors, and they died in battle, and they were, so he says, is it good to tell old tales of Troy event, which is Troy, or praise of dead heroes tried and sage, like they're wise and they've done all these amazing things, or sing the queens of unforgotten age? How should I sing of them? Can it be good to think of glory now? Because again, I think he's looking at that battlefield and all the destruction, and how can I sing these songs of dead heroes? And because he's thinking about myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And myth glorifies all of this thing that he's looking at, and he's looking at it and saying, I don't see a song here. I don't see, like he says, and all our labor under the sun has brought us this,
Mm-hmm.
not the thing we would, which would have been, and that would maybe reflect back on how he felt as a young man going off to war, and he's going to be a hero and he's going to win the battle, and but that changes when you have to stick a bayonet in someone's chest,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's in that same vein as the Victory poem, but he calls it apology, so it's kind of like, I am so sorry, this is not cool, this is not good.
Yeah, it's Well, I was just thinking about that. The apology is almost, I mean, there's kind of a sarcasm in that too. I'm not going to apologize for not telling you these, well, to be direct with it. I'm not going to apologize for not telling you these lies.
Yeah,
It's in
yeah,
all
yeah,
mythology.
yeah.
I'm
Not going to
just,
build a heaven of dreams in a real hell. That's what
yeah,
he says at the beginning, right? I'm not going to build that for you. I'm not going to make this. I'm not going to glorify it.
yeah. I hear echoes of Peter Hitchens in this, or not Peter Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens.
I was going to say Peter.
Peter's the Christian. Never mind. No, Christopher Hitchens. It just sounds very similar to what Hitchens sounds like when he gets very passionate, or when he would get very passionate um, about no, this is not. This is not.
Make
I'm
it
not going
pretty.
to capitulate to these fairy tales, to these stories. I've seen too much. There's too much around me that says different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, just even in saying that, it reminds me of Jordan Peterson. Like my husband and I were talking about it the other day, because I was talking to him about, we had a discussion on one of the general chats. We were talking about how to move in the world in such a way that you could change this, extreme polarization that everybody feels like they're in. And I felt that the only way you can do that is actually just by what Jordan Peterson says. It's an individual. It starts with the individual,
Mm,
and the individual, speaking the truth, or at least not lying, right? And thinking about them, improving their lives, but also the lives of their family and their wider community and so on. And I thought, I was talking to my husband about it, and I said, well, one of the interesting things about that is that if Jordan Peterson didn't think like that, he would have never showed up on the radar.
hmm
Or if he didn't implement that in his life, because when it got to like where C.S. Lewis is in here, I'm not apologizing, right? I'm not gonna make it pretty. Or Christopher Hitchens, same principle really of a mode of being is. And Jordan Peterson, he said, okay, that I'm not saying that. I'm not doing it. You're not going to coerce me. I'm not going down that road because of the consequences, not because I'm too proud, but because it's not right. Right.
Yeah.
It's not the right thing to do. Yeah. If he hadn't have walked out what he believes, acted right on what he believes, because that's really where, like you were saying in the last conversation, what we believe is what we act out.
Yeah.
Right? Then nobody would, he'd still be a guy with a bunch of YouTube videos that a few people would have benefited from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was when he was.
There's another conversation that I had recently where, I talk about one of the things that I appreciate about Peterson, and it's that, he's just, and Paul Vanderklay has said this, I don't think Peterson necessarily even fully understands what he's doing, but whatever he's doing, he's able to speak to people in ways where they couldn't hear it any other way. And in the conversation that we had, it was between me and two of our other randos who have been on Paul's channel, Cassidy and Christian, and I don't know if that's going to come out before this or after this, but I was just talking about how his ability. The thing that I admire is his ability to communicate very relevant. Well, to make the Bible and the mythopoetic compelling, where churches have seemed to have been unable to do that to a broad swath of a very secularist, materialist, very scientifically, well, modernistic mind. It's very hard to find any of those things compelling whenever everything that modernity has done has made so many things that seemed magical or impossible or would seem that way, to someone who lived 100 years ago, a reality for us. But what we found is these things are somehow disconnecting us from meaning and sometimes from hope. I really liked your hope versus meaning crisis conversation that you had with Mary and with Karen. But yeah, I don't remember what we were just talking about that led me off in this direction. But Peterson himself, there's just something. There's some kind of gift or something that's happening through him that's making it possible for people to hear and to see where for whatever reason they couldn't before.
Well, he doesn't just say what he thinks. There are a lot of people who can say things. Steven Pinker, for example. He can say a lot of stuff. He's done all the research, he says everything, and it sounds, to me anyways, very mechanical and very robotic and very detached, right? But Jordan Peterson has embodied all the thoughts that he has had over the years. He's come to a conclusion about what's the most important thing for him. And he's tried, like he said himself, he's tried to undercut his own arguments, and he can't. And so he feels secure in what he's saying. He doesn't think there's any other way around it. And that is the kind of that hero's journey, right? Like we were talking in the general chat, and Iron said, well, the hero doesn't always have to slay the dragons on the outside. He can be slaying them on the inside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so when you get to that point in your life where you embody it, that's why I think he uses the term, I act as if God is real. Because there is no other way to really be, right, in the world. You can skate all over the surface of everything, but it isn't real until you embody it. And you have to embody it through your own experiences. You learn through life and the difficulties, pain, suffering.
Yeah.
Those are the constraints, right, that force you down this nice little narrow way, and then you come up with something, right? So yeah. Anyway, I just think that's the appeal that he has. It's that when he's speaking to people, it's moving them literally. It's goose. It's it's tears. It's kind of all this, because he's not talking off the top of his head. He's talking out of his heart. It's embodied.
Yeah. Got it. Well, I think we're pretty close to an hour.
Okay.
And
well,
so
we got through more than 3 now. We did 4.
Wow, look at that. We're increasing our pace.
Ode for New Year's is the next one, and it's a little longer.
Well, we've got that one to look forward to then. So until next time, I will end the recording right here.